Welcome to the Fatherhood Challenge podcast. The Fatherhood Challenge is a movement to awaken and inspire fathers everywhere to take great pride in their role and to challenge society to understand how important fathers are to the stability of an environment and culture. We're going to encourage and challenge each other to step up and do courageous things that make our families and communities better places. So let's get to it. Greetings, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me. As always, it's good to have you here. This is going to be a really awesome episode. I've got with me Mike Schrock. Mike Schrock has an extensive background in dealing with type 1 diabetes, kids with type 1 diabetes specifically. He also ran an organization called JDRF, which stands for Junior Diabetes Research Fund, and quite an extensive background there. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce you to Mike and let him go ahead and tell you the rest from there.
Well, thank you, Jonathan. Quite the build up there for little old me. But as you said, my name is Mike Schrock. I am 44 years old. I live in Urbana, Iowa. I've been married for 20 years to my wonderful wife, Heather. And I have two daughters, one that is 18 years old and is a freshman in college. And then one that we'll probably spend most of our time talking about today. And that is my 16-year-old, who is the type 1 diabetic, who is a junior at Centerpoint Urbana High School.
So the first thing that comes through my mind, it's one that I think I remember having these same thoughts when I discovered for the first time that I was going to be a father. And that is just this sheer feeling of what am I doing? And then this whole idea of a panic where I feel like I don't know what I'm doing. And then trying to reconcile that and figure out, well, how do I prepare myself for this? What was walking through your mind? I mean, how did you feel that moment that you learned that you were going to be a dad for the first time?
Well, I think for me, it was a roller coaster of emotions. My wife and I had talked about or had made plans to have children. So the fact when we actually found out that we were pregnant with our first child was exciting. Really excited, wanted to tell family, friends, things like that. But then about 48 hours later, the reality of the whole situation kind of set in. And it was like, am I prepared? Am I prepared to bring a life into this world and care for it? Am I experienced enough? Do I know all the tricks of the trade? Do I have the training? Have I read all the books? Things like that. And so there was a little bit of panic there mixed in with the excitement. And, I think throughout the 9 months that we were pregnant with my first child, it just kind of veered back and forth. I was excited, but then I would kind of overthink it and get really, really nervous. I remember prior to her having the baby, the couple weeks before having our first child, I started to get really nervous. Just knowing, again, that I was going to have to care for this small child. And I, don't have any experience doing this, and what if I fail, or what if I'm not good enough, and things like that. So for me, to kind of sum it up, it was just, I was all over the place. I was an emotional wreck.
Was it hard for you to adjust to that role, just of realizing it's that word that from now on you are referred to as dad or father? How did you adapt to that reality?
For me, and what I tell a lot of people based on my own experiences, is that really what it came down to was it's fascinating how life works, in the fact that you go through this 9 months of mixed emotions and anticipating things that may not come true, assuming this or that, or trying to kind of play out how you being a dad is going to be in your head. All that gets kind of washed away that first time you hold your child in the hospital. And it's like, and I don't even know how to explain it, you just magically become dad. And you feel like you know what you're doing. There's a comfort in that. Like, for me, having daughters, I felt like, okay, I can protect you. I can do this. And it just, for some reason, there was a sense of calmness about that first time meeting my daughter. And then as you go through life, as your kids start to age and you go through the different stages of their life with them, what you find out is that or at least what I have found out in my experiences, is that I'm always going to be dad, but sometimes dad screws up. Sometimes dad gets trumped by mom. But at the end of the day, you're still that guy that your kids refer to as dad, and a real pivot point or a real solid piece of their life. So it just, I don't know how it happens. I don't know that there's books or studies on how that happens. It's just a feeling and something that comes about the first time you hold your child.
I think that's very, very true. I can relate to that 100%. I think that exact moment where I held him for the first time and we had that gaze where he looked up at me and I looked down at him and I was just holding him. Everything
Right.
that I had been scared of, everything at that moment just melted away, and just something very inexplicable happened in that moment. So that makes perfect sense.
Right. And it's almost like that look from your child, looking right at you, gives you like a sense of confirmation that, hey, dad, things are going to be all right. Things are going to be cool. And it's like I said, it's like that child kind of giving you the, okay, here we go. This is going to be awesome.
That's awesome. Exactly. And then speaking of bonding moments too, I mean, do you have any other moments that come to your mind? It may be something funny that happened. It might even be a funny joke that the two of you share. Anything that is really something that bonds you two together.
There's, and I thought about this quite a bit. There's different moments in my life with my two girls, and what's fascinating about my two kids, and I'm sure it's true for many people that have multiple children, is the relationship that you have with each kid is different in a way. The love is the same. The wanting to protect and care is the same, but there's this little nuance of a relationship that you have with each kid that's different. And for each of my kids, there's different moments throughout their lives where we've bonded because I've been in a position to kind of be that right person at the time. An example would be, and I know we'll talk more about it later here in the interview, is when my now 16-year-old daughter was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. Me also being a type 1 diabetic and living with it for a long time, that was something we were able to share, because when she was having her tough times with diabetes, trying to explain that to her mom was trying to explain, algebra to your dog. Because my wife, and God love her soul, just didn't understand what it's like to live with this complication in your life, or this complication at that point in her life. But with me, like, I could say, I get it. Like, I know exactly how you're feeling. And so with my youngest one, as sad as it is to say, we bond quite a bit with our common disease, which is type 1 diabetes.
What is type 1 diabetes for those that you and I are very familiar with it, but there may be some who don't really know what that is.
Right. And I will give you kind of the kindergarten version of it, just because I'm a simple person myself, and I know people appreciate simplicity, but it's basically when your pancreas in your body stops producing insulin, which insulin is the chemical in your body that breaks down sugars, carbohydrates, and so on and so forth to give your body energy. So your pancreas basically stops producing that. So as a type 1 diabetic, you have to provide that insulin into your body for any carbohydrates or sugars that you put into your body. So you have to kind of find that equation. So you're putting in enough insulin to correctly break down the amount of sugars that are going into your body, so you can have energy to complete your day or do things like anybody else.
What does that mean for a child that has to live with this?
What it really means for a child. My daughter was 4 when she was diagnosed, and for a 4-year-old, giving shots or putting insulin into her body is a very scary thing. We all know kids don't like shots to begin with, but basically, this means they have to mature really, really quickly, and they have to understand that they're not like everybody else in the fact that they have to do something a little extra to make sure that they stay healthy. They can still play, they can still do sports, they can still do everything else that other kids can, but they have to give themselves a little extra care. And for kids at a young age, it's hard to comprehend that. It's hard to understand, like, why do I have to do this? And specifically when diabetes kind of kicks back at the kid, for example, maybe too much insulin was given and a child's blood sugar drops low and you have to correct that. That kid has to sit out of activities, which is hard to do as a kid. And so for kids, they have to grow up quickly and really mature in the fact that their life from here on out is going to take a little extra care. And they have to learn how to do that so they can continue to live, be healthy, and do things that other kids do.
I think that's a great description of it. One thing too, I might even add to that is that not only does the child have to mature, but in a sense, the parent has to mature as well. And whatever insecurities and just feelings, in any insecurity that you had as a father, the minute you find out that your life is about to change forever, as a father, you have to grow up really, really fast. And that is almost a terrifying feeling. At least it was for me. I still remember that moment that just before the diagnosis, when I was rushing him to the hospital to try to figure out what was going on with him. That lifeless look and feeling that he had was extremely terrifying. And then the diagnosis, and this is still a really hard, a very difficult one for me to swallow, is hearing the diagnosis, well, actually leading up to it. And they said it's going to be one of two options. Either your son has type 1 diabetes or your son has leukemia. And this is where, for me, the guilt happens, where I'm sitting there praying that it's leukemia. Because if it's leukemia, that can be fixed. If it's type 1, it's a life sentence.
Right.
And that, even to this day, I struggle with the fact that I had those thoughts. But I mean, what was it like for you when you just leading up to that moment?
Well, I'll actually just tell our story, because I think that really, I think people listening to this podcast will then identify, and I think, Jonathan, you can identify with this as well. But it was May 10th, 2009. It was Mother's Day, and I had decided to go on a trail walk with my neighbor, and my wife and my 2 daughters were just kind of playing outside in the yard. And because I have type 1 diabetes, I have all sorts of testing supplies and things like that just laying around the house. And a couple nights prior, we had noticed that my youngest daughter, whose name is Michaela, was starting to wet the bed again. And this was, we noticed this because, we had just potty trained her and she had, gone a long time without doing it. But we didn't think anything of it until we started to notice that she was drinking a lot of water, juice, things like that, and having to go to the bathroom a lot. And so I decided to go on this little trail walk with my neighbor, and I probably wasn't a half an hour into the trail walk, and my wife calls me and says, I just tested our daughter's blood sugar. It was over 300 3 different times. I think we need to go in. And so I rushed home, grabbed my daughter, and because her blood sugar was so high, and for those of you not familiar, your blood sugar for a normal person is usually between 80 and 100. So 365 was about 3 times the normal blood sugar that an average human being should have. And so going into the hospital, driving the half an hour to Cedar Rapids, I knew that my daughter had type 1 diabetes. It was just a matter of getting it confirmed from our doctor. And so we pulled up to the emergency room. I grabbed my daughter and I was holding her in my arms. And I said to the receptionist, I said, this is who we are. My daughter has type 1 diabetes. We need to see a doctor. And I just remember that like it was yesterday, because the guilt of being a dad that has type 1, it's hard to, regardless of what studies say about, type 1 diabetes, having a genetic piece, which it's not supposed to be as high as, or wasn't believed to be as high as somebody with type 2, but there was still a chance. Just the idea of knowing that my daughter had picked up this chronic illness from me, just absolutely knocked me down. And we got my daughter in. She got put right away on an insulin drip because she was dehydrated at the time. We spent our time in the hospital. My wife did a lot of the diabetes education to, get her kind of up to speed because, again, with me as an adult with type 1, I can take care of myself. But now my daughter was going to need the support from not only myself, but also from my wife. And so my wife was getting that education. And quite honestly, I was getting the education as well because, not everyone with type 1 is the same. And my daughter and I definitely have our differences. But fast forward to a week later and coming back home, and I just went to this dark place. I wasn't really talking with anybody, kind of through this pity party. I really just went into a dark, ugly space and a lot of self-blame. And, I spent a few nights, getting teary-eyed about the whole thing. And, I spent a lot of time in prayer, asking, God, why my kid? Why us? And just a lot of asking why. And it wasn't until about 2 months later that I was in my garage and I was just tinkering around with something in the garage. And it was the only way that I could do something to kind of take my mind off everything. And my little daughter, 4 years old, comes out to the garage and she just asked me out of the blue. She's like, Dad, how did I get type 1 diabetes? And I'm like, okay, this is a 4-year-old asking me how she got it. Like I could go through the whole Google explanation of how this happened, but she's not going to understand that. So I took the easy way out and I said, you know what? You got it from me. And as I looked at her, like you could see the wheels turning in her eyes. And what she said next forever has changed my life. And until this day has changed my life. And she said to me, Dad, will there ever be a time when I don't have type 1 diabetes? And, at that point as a father with your 4-year-old saying, hey, Dad, am I ever not going to have this disease? I thought to myself really quick, well, again, I could take the easy road and say, well, yeah, at some point you'll never have it, and basically kind of tell her that white lie, like we tend to do with Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny and so on and so forth. But I figured, you know what, if I'm gonna lie to my kids, I'm gonna lie to my kids about that stuff. So I'm just gonna be honest. And so what I did is I said to my daughter, I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna promise to you to try to do everything that I can to hopefully someday make you not have this. And that was the end of the conversation. And that conversation right there, 12 years ago with a 4-year-old in my garage has inspired me to this day to, in everything I do, like to just keep fighting, and whether it's, something I'm doing for work, something I'm doing on a personal level, or in this case, if it's with diabetes and diabetes research and things like that, like you just have to keep fighting, because those words that I told my daughter, like, I'm going to do everything I can, like as her dad, as somebody who has the responsibility of molding this young person into a great adult, like the worst thing that I could do is not model the behavior that I talk about. And so if I make a promise to my kid, I've got to follow through on that. And so from that conversation to this present day, I've always used that interaction to really motivate me in everything that I do.
Every single one of the emotions, the roller coasters that you went through, the prayers asking God, why did this happen to my daughter? Every single one of those things, all of those quite tough questions I experienced, every single bit of it. So I can relate to it 100%. When you, when you made that promise to your daughter, did that at all connect with you? Was that a driving factor when you got involved with JDRF? How did that involvement happen?
Yeah, so that was, and that's a great question, and a kind of a great way to describe it. The driving factor, So I made this promise to my daughter, like I was going to do everything I can, and so what it came down to was I had to evaluate the situation I was in and what I could do. So I'm smart enough to know the things that I don't know. So I'm not going to build a scientific lab in my backyard and try to develop a cure for diabetes, because A, I'm not smart enough to do that, and B, that's just not going to work. So I had to really evaluate, like I had to put into action what I could. And so I had to figure out, what is that action? Like, what can I do that will help drive me towards this promise that I made for my daughter? And that's when JDRF got into our lives, and they were talking about their organization and what they do and how they do it. But more importantly, I asked the question to JDRF, what can I do as, your average dad of a type 1 diabetic to help further not only my promise, but the mission to cure type 1 diabetes in all kids and all adults. And that's when they gave me a list of options. You can be a mentor to other families. You can participate in our walks, our rides, our galas, things like that, which means, not only showing up and advocating, but also reaching out to friends and family and doing some fundraising. And so I chose what I felt I could do best, and that was advocating and fundraising. I'm like, well, I could do that. I've got plenty of friends that I feel confident will jump on board and do this. And so I found my path through JDRF by just kind of looking at all the things that I could do and picking the one that worked best for me.
I think that's awesome. What was your source of strength and motivation that got you through the diagnosis and every other low point resulting from that diagnosis?
Well, I think for me, it was coming home and looking at that 4-year-old in the face every day, right? And I would ask myself, did I do everything I could today to help get her closer to not having type 1 diabetes anymore? And that was a question that in the beginning, I asked myself quite a bit, like, have I done everything? And um, I'll admit that when we started with our fundraising for JDRF, I went crazy. I mean, I talked about it with everyone that would listen to me, everywhere that they would listen to me, and just did everything that I could to try to not only spread awareness and advocate for type 1 diabetes research, but also to raise some money. And so my accountability was just looking at my kid in the face, because at 4 years old, there's very little things that she could do. And so as a dad, I had to do that. I had to step into that role, whether I was tired from a full day of work, whether I wasn't feeling good or not. I had to step into it and do it, because I made this promise to her, and I had to hold myself accountable to that.
I remember attending several of the events that you were responsible for coordinating. And the feeling I remember having was a strong, overwhelming sense of community, that just this feeling that I was not alone. I looked around me and I saw other dads there that were just like me, had similar stories just like mine. And the feeling, that first moment of seeing that and making that observation, the next thing I felt after that was this internal feeling of, it's going to be okay. I'm not alone. I can do this.
Right.
What was your
Right.
what would you say was your greatest moment as a parent overall?
Um, it's that's a difficult question. I have my 18-year-old daughter who's a freshman in college right now. Is just killing it right now. She, graduated National Honor Society. She's wanted to be a nurse since the fourth grade. She's going to school for nursing. She's chasing her dream of playing collegiate soccer right now, and is doing that. She just got her midterms back, and she's getting all A's. And as a dad, I couldn't be any more proud of her drive, her maturity of just going and getting it. And that's one example of the thing that I really appreciate the most about my kids is they just go and get it. They get after it. They find something that they like, and they pour their heart and their passion into it. And I really, at the end of the day, I hope that they've picked that up from the years that our family has spent participating in JDRF and doing other causes that are near and dear to our heart. But I'm just so proud of the way that our kids continue to grow and love those around them, and fight for their dreams and face life with the maturity that they do. Uh, as a dad, it makes me feel really, really good.
I think if I had to sum up what I just heard, like your answer just now, and sum it up in one word,
Mm-hmm.
I think that word for me would be overcoming.
Oh, absolutely.
Not just your kids, but you as their father. It's overcoming. I think that's the word that comes to mind.
Yeah, and I think that's an excellent word, Jonathan. Not only, I'm going to be honest with you, our family in regards to health has been through the ringer. And one of the things that we wanted to make clear to our kids right away was, it's okay to be mad about it, upset, disappointed, whatever. It's okay to have those emotions. But at the end of the day, man, you got to strap your boots on, and you got to go to work, and you've got to overcome these things. Not only the difficulties that I've had in my 20 plus years of having type 1 diabetes. I've had some hardships and some things that have set me back. my wife has gone through a bout of thyroid cancer, and those were things that we had to work with, and just the day to day with my daughter and her difficulties with type 1 diabetes. We have just had to become a family that, um, regardless of how we're feeling, you still have to get up every morning and you got to do the work. And that's the only way you're going to be successful. We could very easily fall into this path of feeling bad for ourselves and looking to others to kind of, um, pick us up or save us from any pity party that we may be having. But you know what? We decided as a family unit, we're going to lean on each other, and we're going to build ourselves up strong enough to be able to withhold any negative stuff and use it as a learning experience, learn from it. And one of the things that I like to say in our family is, if we're going to fail, let's fail forward. Let's learn from it, and let's do everything we can to overcome.
Well, I felt inspired by that. That's for sure. Thank you so much for sharing that. One of the things I wonder is, I look at just society, the messages that are being told to dads, just from the media, from the movies, pop culture, everywhere. And I think dads have enough of a challenge as it is and whatnot, but turning the spotlight back onto dads, what would you say is one of the greatest challenges that dads face today, and how can they overcome it?
I think one of the biggest challenges for dads is the stereotype that dads have to be this manly, tough guy all the time, right? And we gravitate towards this role of being the protector. And when you do that, you feel as a dad that it may be jeopardizing your manhood, as I'm making air quotes right now, to actually feel emotion. And that's one of the things that I challenge dads to do, is allow yourself to feel that emotion and not be ashamed of feeling that emotion. It doesn't make you any less of a man. It doesn't make you any less of a protector. It just, I think what it really does is it reveals your true self to your kids. For example, I am a very emotional person when it comes to my kids and things that they do. I can recall my daughters taking dance lessons and their first recital, just being so moved to not actual tears, but I had that lump in my throat that you get before you cry, of just overwhelming pride in how just amazed I was at them. And so with dads, we tend to gravitate again towards this, I got to be macho. And, I could have done the macho thing and sit there and, at the end of it say, good job, dance. But you know what? I felt that. And I wanted my girls to know that I felt I was connected to you in that one time that you were dancing on stage. And it may not have occurred to you, but in the audience, like, there was a connection there, and it made me feel. And so I talked to my girls about that and just said, I really felt absolutely just proud, inspired by what you've done up there. So if I was to talk about challenges, it's overcoming this stereotype that the world gives us, that all men need to be these burly, tough men with no feeling. And I think that in the world today, we're starting to see more dads feel, and it makes me feel happy, because I think it takes pressure off of the kids, specifically, as they're growing up. and it allows dads to have an even deeper relationship with their children as they're growing up.
I agree 100%. I mean, I think the macho to me is showing up, being engaged, and being involved. That is definitely a macho thing for fathers to do. And the emotional part of it, I felt those very same things the very same emotions that you mentioned. I felt those very same emotions with my own kids, just seeing them excel at little things and even big events, seeing them do very, very well. You do get this swelling bit of pride inside of you that you just want to yell. You just want to do something to just let it out, because it's a big emotion. And I think showing and expressing that, I think, just makes you real. And I don't think that there is enough of that today.
Absolutely.
So that's just my personal opinion. Do you have, I would like to wrap up with some kind of a overall challenge, and this can be outside the whole type 1 discussion circle that we've had, or inside if you want, but mainly I just would like to know, do you have any type of a challenge in this moment that you would like to extend out to all dads, to challenge them?
That's a great question. And, I actually do. And I'm actually starting to see, I'm going to put this challenge out there, although I'm actually starting to see more and more of it now these days than I did before. And that challenge is for all dads to just be present. And it sounds like a pretty generic and easy challenge, but you have to really dive into, what does it mean to be present? Does that just mean, sitting at dance recitals, sitting at ball games, sitting at the dinner table, just being there? No, it goes further than that. Invest your time into your kids by being there for them when, for example, I have 2 daughters, and we deal with the whole boyfriend stuff. Be there to listen. Sometimes they don't want advice. A lot of the times my girls don't want advice from me. But I'm there to listen, and I'm there to, be that crying shoulder that they need. I'm also there to give advice if they ask. I'm also there to offer a lot of advice that they don't ask for, which I think is a challenge of any parent. But being present in your kid's life, recognize that your kid is special, that there is an opportunity for you as a dad to have a unique, to you only relationship with this person that you gave life to, and really embrace that opportunity. Don't be one of those dads that after your kid graduates high school and they go on to college or whatever it may be and move out, that you say, man, I wish I would have spent more time with them. And understand that as a dad, that there's going to be things that you don't necessarily want to do, or you're going to be tired, or whatever it may be. But if you do those things, it may be kind of a pain to you at the time, but it means the world to your kids. I've shagged so many soccer balls in my yard after a full day of work that I had no business being out there. I didn't want to be out there. I was tired, but I went out there and I shagged those balls. And I did it because I knew that my daughter had a dream to play college soccer. And so I had to put myself aside and be present for her to help her achieve her goal or work towards her goal. And I just want to see more dads doing things like that, playing catch with their kids in the yard, or taking them to a movie, take them out to dinner, or just play Barbies with them. If you've got little ones, sit down and play Barbies. Just little things like that, because as somebody who has older kids now, I can look back at the things that I did when I when my kids were younger that I know that I didn't want to do. Times that I didn't go fishing when I wanted to go fishing by myself, but instead stayed home and pushed my daughter on the swings in our yard. Looking back now, I am so glad that I chose to do that. It has just built a bond between me and my kids that would have never been built had I chose to not be present.
What a great challenge. I appreciate you extending that challenge out to all of us. So thank you so much for stepping up and doing that. And what a way to end our time together. Mike, thank you so much for sharing this time out of your day and sharing your thoughts and wisdom with all of us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It was fun.
And that concludes our time, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. It's always appreciated. Stay tuned for the next episode. If you enjoyed this show and are getting value out of it, there are 2 ways you can support this podcast. One is by hitting the follow option on your favorite listening app. This will make it easier to see all the episodes and receive notifications when a new episode is released. The other is by checking out some of the swag in our store. They make great gifts for the holiday, a birthday, or any reason, and they help spread the word about this great movement. The link to the store is in the show description below. Thank you for your support, and I'll see you in the next episode.